I would like to call the meeting to order and ask councillors to please turn all electronic devices to silent or vibrate mode and ensure that they are properly signed into the system. I'm now properly signed in myself. The land acknowledgement statement, I'm going to call on Councillor Nicholson for the land acknowledgement statement.
We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampun Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living in Niagara is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. For a moment of reflection, I call on Councillor DeZero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we gather here today as members of Regional Council, may we be ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and to our community. May we always keep in mind the enduring values of life, exerting our efforts in those areas and on those things that future generations can build with confidence. Let us continue to strive to make a better world.
Thank you. Let us stand now for the Singing of Canada. And as our usual practice, Councillor Greenwood will start us off. Our home and native land, to faith and love, in all our sons commend. With glowing hearts we see, rise the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Once again, I think it will be difficult to find a municipal council that is melodious as this one. So congratulations to all who are in the finest of voice today. We have an addition of items, the adoption of the agenda, some additions to the items. A motion is required to add Haley Bateman as a delegate. As the delegation request was submitted after the deadline, do I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Houston is moving it, Councillor seconder, and it'll be Councillor Edgar. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And a motion is required to add Emily Spanton as a delegate, as the delegation request was submitted after the deadline. Do I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Greenwood, seconded by Councillor Houston. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. You have a further one?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to move to add Sabrina Hill, a member of the Citizens Committee on Councillor Remuneration, to the list of delegations as well to speak to item 5.3 in the Corporate Services minutes.
Seconder for the motion. Councillor Butters, I'll say this time. All in favor? Again, show your hands, please. All in favor? It's important to see the hands. Opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Dart.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'd like to add Dr. John Bacher to speak tonight.
Seconder for that motion, Councillor Edgar. You speak? Okay. Councillor Diodati to speak. This is a debatable motion, I believe. So yes? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Dangerous direction, unprecedented, and inappropriate. OPA 128, which Mr.
Barker wants to speak to, is a local planning matter, not regional. His LPAT issue was dismissed. Mr. Barker's own interpretation appears to be biased, according to the LPAT is what they said, or lack of comprehension. Mr. Barker will have every opportunity to engage as the planning process unfolds, Mr. Chair, in the city of Niagara Falls. That is not a regional issue. That's a local municipal issue. There is no role to play. And through you, Chair, I'd ask that our planner be able to comment on this as well, the appropriateness of this request.
Yeah, we'll do that now. Okay, go ahead, planner.
Through the chair, OPA 128 was appealed by Mr. Bacher. The parties to that appeal were the City of Niagara Falls, Mr. Bacher, as well as GR Can, which is the landowner. The region was not a party to that appeal. The LPAT does have, under Section 35 of the LPAT Act, allows for a party to the appeal to request a review of the decision. Since Niagara Region wasn't a party to the appeal, we don't believe that there's any legal status for this motion that he's requesting. And even in addition to that, there are going to be forthcoming development applications where the region will be a party to as a review agency. And supporting that motion may may fetter our objectivity as part of that planning review process.
Councillor Senzek?
In terms of procedural, our procedural bylaw, there is no item pertaining to this on the agenda tonight. So can I have comment about the appropriateness of adding someone to speak on something that's actually not on our agenda?
Clerk?
Through you, Chair, you're correct, Councillor Senzek. Our procedural bylaw does provide criteria regarding delegations coming to council. Part of that criteria relates to the delegation either relating to a matter on the agenda or being an emergent matter. In consultation with planning staff, it's my understanding that this is not an emergent matter for Niagara Region, and therefore the request was not supported.
Councillor Edgar?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this has been a very contentious issue for the 5 years that I've been on council. And I like to ask powers that be, that people that don't understand, perhaps planning, as to when and if regional council will be able to hear from Dr. Bacher, maybe at a time in the future, and if and when we will be able to have a say in whether or not they destroy this this forest.
Thank you.
Through the chair, as Mayor Diodati mentioned, this is a local planning matter. So the future planning applications will be zoning amendments as well as plan of subdivision. They will be heard by local council for approval. The region's role in that review of the future development applications is we're a commenting agency, so we will be reviewing the environmental work that comes through, as well as any engineering, archaeological, or typical review process. So we wouldn't necessarily be hearing anything here at the region, at planning committee, because that, again, is a local planning matter, and we're just a commenting agency.
If I recall, it was last term, it was in front of us on a couple of occasions. Why then and not now then?
Staff?
Through the chair, I can't answer to why it was discussed in the past. I wasn't here at that time, but I can state that the future development applications coming through as part of our MOU with our 12 municipalities, that authority has been delegated to the City of Niagara Falls, and so zoning bylaw amendments as well as a draft plan of subdivision, they get approved at the local municipality, and again, we're the commenting agency.
So there is no standing for the Niagara region at all in this, other than a comment? Through you, Chair. Pardon me.
Through the chair, correct, we are a commenting agency. through development applications at times where we are reviewing it, there may be opportunities where we agree or disagree. There's a back and forth between the review of applications. The only time that, per se, regional council would see anything related to those applications is when there's a disagreement between regional staff and the decision that's being made at local council. If that were the case, then we'd come back to regional council and request permission to file an appeal on that application. But at this time, the applications have just been submitted and we're in the review process. What's important to note is that any future development applications related to the OPA 128 lands are going to be going through a public process. They will be reviewed by agencies as well as the region. It will also include the Ministry of Environment, include the province, as well as there will be a public meeting open to the public. So there's many opportunities for members of the public to review what's being proposed. It just won't be at Planning Committee at Regional Council. It'll be at Planning Committee at City of Niagara Falls.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rigby,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The questions I had have been asked, so thank you.
Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I find it really interesting that a resident of Niagara feels so strongly that he wants to come and tell us something. I, for one, am not afraid to hear what he has to say. I think that when a person makes that effort, and it's certainly on an issue such as this one that has been very contentious, there's people across the region of Niagara that do care what happens there, even if they don't have a direct say in it. So I, for one, I'm not afraid to hear what this individual has to say. I'm going to urge others to allow him to speak.
Any further speakers? If not, I will call the question. It requires a 2/3 majority as a recorded vote. Request for a recorded vote to hear Dr. Bacher.
The vote is open.
Clerk, are there 2/3? They would have required a 2/3 vote for this particular item. The motion is defeated. Are there any changes to the order of the agenda? Councillor Yip.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I move to have corporate services minute items 5.4 and 5.3 respectively moved up on the agenda to be discussed immediately following the delegations out of respect for the delegates' time.
Anything else? I'll take a motion. You have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Hewson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Our next item then is the order of items as amended. And does that require a mover and seconder? It requires a mover and seconder. So it looks like Councillor Zappa has got his hand up. And Councillor Bilsma as well. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So I'll ask for a mover and seconder to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Hewson, Councillor Diodati. Any debate? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? If none, there are no what we call presentations. And so we have the chair's report. I would like to take a few moments to provide members of council with the highlights of events I attended on your behalf since our last meeting. On October 19, I joined with other men from across Niagara to participate in the 14th annual Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event to end violence against women, which was held at the Penn Center. Proceeds from this annual event support the important work of Julian's Place Women's Shelter in St. Catharines. On October 23, I attended a breakfast meeting, and again, there are often other members of council who are there, at the Scotiabank Convention Center, hosted by a local delegation that is spearheading a bid to bring the European Cyclist Federation Velocity Conference to Niagara Falls in 2022. Local tourism officials and municipal representatives were joined by ECF representatives from Brussels, who were visiting Niagara as part of the bid process after Niagara had successfully been added to the short list of host communities vying to host this global cycling summit. I was pleased to join with public health staff, community partners, and members of council on October 24th to the official ribbon cutting ceremony commemorating the opening of the new home for Niagara Public Health in Niagara Falls. The new 21,500 square foot facility located at 7835 McLeod Road will help public health staff deliver a full range of programs and services which support Niagara residents. On October 24, I attended the advanced screening of Harriet at the landmark Cinemas in St. Catharines. This Hollywood biopic about the Underground Railroad hero, Harriet Tubman, depicts her life story, including her heroic efforts to help slaves escape to freedom from the U.S. Civil War. Ms. Tubman arrived in St. Catharines, or lived in St. Catharines at least, from 1850 to 1860, and did much of her Underground Railroad work at that time. As a movie reviewer, I would recommend you get an opportunity to certainly view that movie. On October 29, I delivered greetings from Council to the United States-Canada Transportation Border Working Group for holding their 2019 fall plenary session in Niagara Falls. Representatives from Canadian and U.S. Border Protection Services, law enforcement, federal highways, and the transportation and logistics sector discuss best practices for keeping our borders safe while ensuring efficient transfer of people and goods between our two nations. On Friday, November 1, I was pleased to bring greetings on behalf of the Niagara region to attendees of the, and many of you were there, of the 2019 Niagara Economic Summit at White Oaks Conference Resort in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Hosted by the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, the event brought together Niagara's business and institutional communities to celebrate shared successes and discuss tomorrow's workforce, livable communities, and how game-changing innovations will shape how we do business in the future. I was honored to join with friends, supporters, and constituents of Niagara Falls MP Rob Nicholson, who gathered on November 2nd to pay tribute and recognize his 30 years of public service on behalf of the people of Niagara Falls, both as a member of Parliament and a regional councillor. Rob's time in elected office saw him serve under 3 different prime ministers, where he was entrusted with the most senior portfolios in the Government of Canada. I know members of council would agree that we all wish the best for Rob as he begins a new phase of his life, and join with me in wishing him a happy, relaxing, and rewarding retirement, if indeed that's what it is. I joined representatives from the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce on November 8th when they welcomed U.S. Consul General Greg Stanford to Niagara to participate in a roundtable discussion dealing with trade and cross-border issues. On Friday, November 8th, I had the honor of joining Chief Brian McCullough and members of the Niagara Regional Staff, members of the Police Services Board, and members of the De Simone family at Niagara Regional Police Headquarters in Niagara Falls for the dedication ceremony of the Constable Luciano De Simone Memorial Bridge, located on the QEW overpass between McLeod Road and Lions Creek Road. The bridge has been named in honor of the former NRP officer who died in the line of duty in 1974 following a collision on the QEW with a flatbed transport truck. This memorial dedication serves as a reminder of the risks police officers face every day as they serve the communities and As I say, the entire police board was there, as well as some other representatives. On November 9 and 10, the City of Welland welcomed Rogers' hometown hockey tour for a weekend celebration, highlighting Welland's proud hockey heritage. Television personalities Ron McLean and Tara Sloan hosted the weekend event, which showcased Welland during Sunday's nationally televised broadcast of the Toronto Maple Leafs versus Chicago Blackhawks game. Congratulations to Mayor Campion, members of his council, and members of regional council, and all volunteers and event organizers who contributed to the success of the event. Over the past few weeks, communities throughout Niagara held Remembrance Day services and dinners to remember those who served in our nation's defense. I was honored to represent the Niagara region and lay ceremonial wreaths at services held in St. Catharines, as were several members of regional council who did that throughout their communities. And regional council was well represented, I must say, at these events, and we are very grateful, as I know the veterans are, for your attendance. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of meeting with Blake Schutten when he stopped by my office with Mayor Kevin Gibson. Blake was the winner of the Township of Wainfleet's Mayor for the Day contest for students in grades 6 to 8. Following our meeting, both mayors paid a visit to Chief Brian McCullough at Niagara Regional Headquarters in Niagara Falls. And I did take the opportunity to have a photograph taken with the mayor for the day, wearing the bling or the ceremonial chain of office. You can tell I never wear it, so he wore it as many times as I've worn it now on that occasion. But he was delighted to do it, and thanks to Mayor Gibson for that arrangement. Speaking of the code of conduct, just want to touch on that for just a moment, very lightly. With council's indulgence, I would like to take a moment to remind councillors about the importance of decorum and civility as we progress through the rest of this term. As you know, as representatives of the region, we have a duty to treat members of the public, staff, and fellow councillors appropriately at all times. It goes without saying that members of the public are closely watching how we interact with one another. I know that members can make comments in jest, I've done it myself, or as a symptom of passionate debate. But I think it's important to note that your intent is not what members of the public notice. Instead, sometimes our offhand comments can be easily perceived as disrespectful and unprofessional. As per our code of conduct, councillors are reminded to conduct themselves in a way that shows respect and professionalism for everyone, including members of the public, staff, and one another. As you know, the process for dealing with complaints under our code of conduct includes a formal investigation by our Integrity Commissioner. These investigations can cost the Niagara taxpayer thousands in legal fees and distract from the business of council. While I believe in the importance and value of the Integrity Commissioner for certain issues, I think most of our preferences would be to avoid these costly exercises proactively. High standards of conduct that are beyond reproach ensure that the integrity of council is maintained, the taxpayer avoids costly investigations, and we can focus on the important work we have before us. I must say, overall, I believe this term of council is highly respectful to the public, of staff, and of each other. I would encourage members to be as conscientious as possible, including myself, as we move forward over the next 3 years. I know each of us in this room is committed to improving the quality of life for our residents, and I want to ensure we stay focused on the critical objectives and goals we set for ourselves. I thank you for your indulgence of those remarks and of the report. And once again, I thank all members of council for the attending many events on behalf of the council and being so visible and important in terms of your contribution to your communities. So I thank you very much for that. Now, delegations, I guess, is next. We do have a couple of delegations on the agenda this evening. I'll remind the delegations that in accordance with the procedural bylaw, there's a 10-minute time limit for your delegation. And the first is going to be the establishment of Women's Advisory Committee. And speaking to that will be Haley Bateman, resident, City of Niagara Falls. The delegation submission is attached to the agenda item as CLC 74-2019. If I'm not correct, if you're St. Catharines, let me know.
I am St. Catharines.
thought
Once upon a time, I was Niagara
It
Falls.
says in
but-
Niagara Falls on here,
I
and I keep
know.
thinking Haley's from St. Catharines.
Yes, I am from St.
So
Catharines.
those in
Thank you.
St. Catharines can claim Haley. Glad to have you with us, and
Or not.
we welcome your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Bradley. So through you, Chair Bradley, I'm here to speak about the Women's Advisory Committee to ensure that you understand that it is very important that this committee membership be made up entirely of people who identify as women. And to be honest, when I first heard about this committee following the September 19th council meeting, I thought, Matt, it seems like this should have happened 20 years ago, and aren't we past this? But I will tell you that I was entirely wrong. I researched the Women's Advisory Committee throughout Canada. I read scholarly articles. I found a lot of information from the Canadian Women's Foundation and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that speaks to how important gender equity is with respect to serving our community. So I believe Councillor Houston was right in her motion to bring this forward, and I am grateful for the work of regional staff regarding this committee and for Council's decision to unanimously vote in favor of a Women's Advisory Committee. But in speaking with some members of Council, there seems to be a notion that men need to sit on this committee. And Councillor Houston, you and I exchanged emails, and you wrote that if we are attempting to change our society and to be more inclusive and equitable to women, men have to be a part of the conversation. And I've given what you said a lot of thought, and here's the conclusion I've come to. A Women's Advisory Committee exists to make civic matters more inclusive to women, to get our voices heard, to prioritize matters that affect our daily lives. And no man, no matter how supportive of women, will know the challenges we face for our gender. And I'm standing before a group of people who were selected to represent me, and 75% are men. Clerk Norio has shared the report CLK 15-2019 dated November 6, 2019 with me, respecting the establishment of a Women's Advisory Committee, and I have read it over several times. Staff looked to Hamilton, Edmonton, and Vancouver, drawing from their work to develop a terms of reference. And in none of those areas are men part of this committee. And I've been emailing back and forth with Councillor Redikoff as well, who asked at the Corporate Services Committee if the committee contemplates men membership. And through email, you clarified and told me that a Women's Advisory Committee will make better decisions and have broader insights on the various issues that it will deal with if it has the benefit of a male perspective on those issues. And I could not disagree more. The problem with your statement, I believe, is that it is an opinion and not based on fact. Any men who wish to participate on a Women's Advisory Committee could do so by attending the meetings as a guest. And if you would like to speak at the meetings, you can do so as a delegate. And if you believe that the work that is being completed by the Women's Advisory Committee is excellent, you could share it with your network. And finally, I would like to ask Council to better engage with residents. When I reached out to some members of the Corporate Services Committee to discuss this matter of men sitting on a Women's Advisory Committee, only one councillor attempted to engage with me and discuss and learn why I felt so strongly of a women's-only membership. The others had made up their minds. This committee is not about giving men a voice, and it should be about giving women an opportunity to improve and fully participate in city services and civic life. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions of the presenter? If not, we thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. I now see Councillor Edgar's name on the screen, and we would never want to forget Councillor Edgar.
Well, thank you. Councillor Edgar would hope that you would never be forgotten. Thank you for your presentation, your delegation, Haley.
Thank you.
Have you ever in the past served or had anything to do with women's programs or committees or such anywhere else?
I have actually. So I am a graduate of Brock University, Sociology and Women's Studies program. I was a volunteer at Jillian's Place for almost a year. I was a manager at Women's Place of South Niagara for 6 years. I was chair of the media relations component of CEVA, which is the Coalition to End Violence Against Women. And through that committee, we produced while I was there, we produced 2 domestic violence report cards, which were very highly regarded, and 1 supplementary report. And I currently chair the new Equity Inclusivity Committee for the City of St. Catharines. Although I would very much like to clarify that I am here solely based upon my feelings and none of those committees. Thank you for your question.
And through you, Chair, one more. Is this a committee that you would show interest, you would have interest in serving on?
I am a little bit busy right now, but I think it's a wonderful idea. I am so, as I said at the beginning of this, I think I would be thrilled to participate in something like this. Anything to get people more involved. I'm not sure if many of you know, but I did run to represent my city in the regional election. I obviously did not win, but the experience was wonderful. I love engaging with many of you. You always get back to me, and I'm constantly encouraging more women to do so. But I do have an idea of how difficult that is. I did so with very small children and managing and juggling that. And I think that we can do so much more. The reason why I think it's really important, and this council, I'd like to kind of remind you that anything that happens through that committee will come to you. You will have an opportunity to discuss it and talk about it and even vote on those matters. So although I am wishing for the committee to be entirely made up of women, a majority of men who sit before me will have the opportunity to vote on those matters. So.
Thank you, and one more. Do you think that having men serve on this committee would discourage some women from working on this committee, wanting to be on this committee?
I do. I'm not sure that it would for me, and probably it would for me. I don't think that is the intent of women's committees. I do understand the rationale of wanting to be inclusive, but the point of these committees is for women to be inclusive at this table, not for men to be inclusive at that table. So I do think that is something that this council should very much consider. Your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar. Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Carrie, for being here today and expressing your opinion. We don't share the same opinion on this, but I respect that you have a different opinion, and I'm always open to hearing different opinions because it helps inform better decision making. So I'm going to share a little bit of some of my comments that I made to you in the email, because I don't think this council is actually aware of a couple things. The one was, in purposefully had a male colleague second that motion because I felt it was important for our male colleagues not only to show support for an initiative like this, but I do believe it's important for men to take an active role in helping to promote the equality of women and to engage in dialogue and participate in that. And then back to another comment I made on September 19th was the intent was never to help elevate women in society at the expense or to the detriment to men, and that obtaining equality for women really is to the benefit of society as a whole, and that's why I do feel that men have to be part of the conversation, because we can't change the mindset of society if we're excluding a single gender from participating in that. Also, gender is a protected ground under the Human Rights Code. So to implement something like this would require us to put a checkbox on our application that asks the gender of the applicant. So I'm going to actually ask our Director of Human Resources if that is an option available to us, if we're able to ask the gender of the applicants to the committee, and then if we're able to deny applicants based on how they check that box.
Through you, Chair, it would not be recommended that you would have a question on any type of application to be a representative on this committee to indicate your gender or sex or sexual orientation whatsoever.
So that's another concern why I'm worried about excluding men. I fully don't expect a lot of men on the council to want to participate on this committee, but I do have concerns about making it explicit that we are refusing to accept men. So I'm wondering, do you have a comment on that?
Thank you. And I really do appreciate this idea coming forward. And I do appreciate you motioning for me to be a delegate this evening. Again, just to remind, it's not about excluding men. And if men want to participate, you can participate. I would love to see if it was at this, if this is where the meetings were held, I would love to see these stands filled with men to sit and listen to ideas that are brought forward by women. As I said earlier, there are lots of wonderful men out there. There are also lots of men who don't quite understand what women go through and could potentially create a lot of problems for the committee. And I'm cautioning myself on bringing this up. But last term, there was a counselor who brought a lot of negative publicity to Niagara Regional Council. And the possibility of a man like him sitting on a women's committee I can't even wrap my head around that. And the only way to really decipher a person like him sitting on the committee is by acknowledging that he is of a certain gender, and that is in essence the problem. And I will tell you, I looked at terms of reference, as I said, and the City of Vancouver explicitly says that all committee members must be people who identify as women. So I realize that they are in a different province, and that may add something to the conversation or something to be looked at, but all of those committees have exclusively women who sit on them. And I know my friend Emily is going to speak to this as well, but women need to feel safe. We need to have these conversations. Chair Bradley, you spoke about a code of conduct. Those are things that happen quite often, and although they comment about women and things that we deal with, off the collar comments or off the cuff comments, excuse me, and to have those potential comments come at a committee where the space should feel really safe is also something that this council should think about. And again, you have said about excluding men. It is absolutely not about that. It's about making women part of this conversation. So, when this committee does get up and running, I will either maybe be in the stands or maybe I'll be lucky enough to sit on it. But I will look to see if a lot of men at this table are participating as guests. So I would love to see that.
So I just want to comment. I also looked at the terms of reference and I reached out to Hamilton, and Hamilton does not actually exclude men from participating. So we actually have to sample both. Right, Vancouver does specifically state must be a woman or identify as a woman, whereas Hamilton does not specify that men cannot apply, and I confirmed with them that men could apply, and yet the committee is still entirely women. So I just wanted to point that out. But
am I able to ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So is it your thought that if we get 15 women or apply or more, that they would be chosen over men?
Well, I believe, so first of all, none of the council will actually be choosing who is participating on the committee. That would be deferred to staff. So
Okay.
I'd have to ask maybe staff to speak to how the appointments will be accepted.
Any member of staff wish to?
I can answer that through your chair. So similar to other committees that we've enacted as citizens advisory committees, what's in front of council in the report, along with the corresponding terms of reference, essentially outlines what the criteria would be that we would be looking for as representation on the committee. Not to obviously go through and read it, but we're obviously looking for membership to come from diverse backgrounds, who obviously have, excuse me, an interest in Niagara, obviously, to move this issue forward. And so we would assess the criteria of any applicant against that criteria in order to then put those people in front of council to determine who actually would be recommended committee members for council then to determine who would then be on the committee.
And I think maybe what we could do is, and I'm happy to make this amendment to the terms of reference, is we could stipulate that the chair of the committee is preferred to be a woman or a person who identifies as a woman. I think maybe that might be a good compromise.
Chair and vice chair? So
Yes,
at no time.
Chair and Vice Chair. I'm going to make that suggestion, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your
commentary.
Thank you. Councillor Yip.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'll save my comments in accordance with the procedural bylaw until the report hits the floor. But I just, a question for you, because I think the questions around men possibly sitting on the committee come from an interest in men, hopefully come from an interest in men helping to advance the interests of the committee, the mandate of the committee. Can you speak a little bit to how men can be good allies to a women's advisory committee?
Yeah, absolutely. So even in coming here tonight, I am a mom whose partner works shift work, and so your procedures, for example, I wasn't sure that I would be able to speak tonight, and I am grateful that you allowed me to. But in attempting to come here and speak something I am passionate about, I had to get a babysitter. I had to arrange all of that, and that is something that I had to deal with on a consistent basis. So it's thinking along those lines of all the things all the obstacles that women face, to try and correct them and make it more inclusive. Again, being part, some of you have been on this council for many years, some of you are new to council. When this committee gets going, please be sure to read all of the minutes. Please be sure to ask questions, really engage in the committee, and share information. I'm really proud of the city of St. Catharines. We've been doing tons of wonderful work in bringing gender equity forward, and anti-racism, and LGBTQ. All of those things are very important to me. But just be an ally, share information, be respectful, use respectful dialogue, and just champion women. If we bring something forward, listen to it, yeah, just listen and try to make amendments to it. So that was muddled through that one a little bit, but.
Thank you. Councillor Easton.
Chairman, thank you, Haley, for communicating with me. I know that we're not entirely in sync, but it was a very good discussion. I referenced in my notes to you a phrase that I have been talking to some other people about, this phrase of who is excluded when you look through that lens at policies or statements. In the work that you're doing in St. Catharines, I'm just trying to get a sense of what the basic intentions are of the committee that you're sitting on in St. Catharines, to help me understand possibly about this issue of men sitting on the committee. So is that something that you're familiar with in terms of establishing a lens to look in a very broad sense about how policy, how statements impact a much broader group of people?
There's something called intersectional feminism. It's something I'm learning to subscribe to. It's taken me a while, and I am constantly learning, constantly evolving, trying to do better. And based on intersectional feminism, there is, I'm no professor on this, but there is looking at the lens of equality and inequality specifically. So I am a woman, I am in a same-sex relationship. So there are challenges that I face. When we look at diversity, it's not just about gender, it's not about men and women, it's about the challenges that, so when in running for regional council, several people asked me to talk about my family when I knocked on their door. And several people were very disengaged when I did speak about my family and how proud I am of them. So we have to look at things, I think, through an intersectional lens. And when, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I'm sorry.
My apologies. It's Frank O'Maffey.
Mr. O'Maffey was talking about diversity. You have to look at things through that intersectional lens. And we become better. We learn more about struggles people face. You and I look very much the same. We will have kind of the same experience most of the time. Whereas Councillor Height looks very different than I do. He will have different experiences. So that's kind of the challenging part. When you're getting a diverse group together, you have to represent everybody. And you were all voted in here, but again, 75% of you have a very different life than I do. And those are the challenges, because you have to speak and engage people, so you understand what our experiences are, and then be able to use your voice to help forward ours, if that makes any sense. I'm, again, kind of muddling through it, but I think with a group like this, you have to use an intersectional lens, intersectional feminist lens.
And so do you find the statement, who is excluded, rather neutral, or is it useless in terms of trying to come to a common ground kind of approach to the question, something that a man or a woman or any gender could ask in order to establish who's left out or who's not being considered?
You're saying men not being considered for this committee?
No,
is that...
I'm talking just in very general terms, because as you know, I don't have a problem with men. I don't have a problem with men sitting on the committee. I don't have a problem with any gender that people identify with sitting on the committee, because I see the richness of that, but that's where we disagree. But I was just looking at that question as a mechanism to possibly come to some common ground with you in terms of how we would view a problem.
So to be clear, I do not have a problem with men at all. I do not have a problem with men contributing to the committee, but I do have a problem with men sitting at the table and being able to vote and influence a vote on issues that are that will improve the lives of women and girls in our community. I think at no time could you ever understand what it is. Councillor Hyde, if I could pick on you for a second, you're close to me, I mean in proximity. You will never have the same experience as I do, and I will never have the same experience as you do. So, I mean, what could Councillor Hyde contribute that a woman would not be able to contribute in a better fashion, would be the question that I would ask.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Any other questions for the presenter? If not, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
Sorry. I now will call Emily Spanton, resident, City of St. Catharines. The delegation submission is attached to this agenda as item CL-C 75-2019.
Good evening.
Ms. Spanton.
Good evening, Chair, Council. I too would like to speak in support of the creation of a Women's Advisory Committee. As a survivor of sexual assault, particularly at the hands of authority figures, I believe I have a perspective that you should hear. So, when I was assaulted by police officers, the answer I got, even then, for the past 5 years, has always been, things like that don't happen. People aren't assaulted in police stations. Police officers don't do that. These things happen. And in fact, 1 in 3 women in Canada is sexually assaulted. So and very few report it. So that's 1 in 3 women who may be going through something in their lives where they do not feel comfortable speaking in front of men. And that's something that they're dealing with. So that I did want to bring that to your attention. There are a lot of women who don't feel safe being honest and having these conversations. I'm nervous just now talking about it, and I know most of you, so just to give you an idea. But I wanted to give you some actual stats. I think that's also very important. So, women are more likely to experience barriers such as heading a lone parent household, living in poverty, low-paying temporary seasonal jobs. In fact, women make up the majority of Canada's minimum wage workers, and 1/3 of working women make less than $15 per hour. About 3/4 of part-time workers in Canada are women. In 2011, the median employment income in women lone parent families with children under 6 was $21,200. About 50% of the income of male lone parent families, which was $43,300. So that's, I just, these are some facts. This is why I think it's important women sit on these committees. We are disproportionately affected by certain things, and I love statistics. So some more to talk about is, like Haley spoke of, childcare, elder care, work-life balances. Women are more likely to have other commitments. It's harder for us to make the time. And we're often not represented. Like Haley said, 75% of you have a very different experience than many of your constituents. Not to say that I don't have a different than the men too. I want to be inclusive. So we also face gender-based violence. So women are 5 times more likely to experience sexual violence. 1 in 3 Canadian women, as I said, experience sexual violence, and 1 in 6 men do as well. I think that that's a statistic we should be talking about as a society. I don't want to exclude men from that conversation anyways, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So in 99% of sexual assaults, the perpetrator is male. That's just a statistic. So on the other side of this, 1 in 5 children in the Niagara region live in poverty. In St. Catharines, that's 1 in 4. When we support women, we support their children. We support our children in the community as well. So it can be difficult for women to feel safe to share our thoughts when men are around, particularly in light of some of the barriers we've spoken about and the reception their ideas receive. For me, it can be triggering. I'm not alone in that. And I think a Women's Advisory Council or committee should be made up of mostly women. I'm not saying it needs to specifically say no men on it. I think perhaps the language, I've thought a lot about this because I am for inclusion as well, should maybe read preference will be given to those with lived experience of female identity. I think that way men are free to apply, but I think that preference should be given to women. And I think that that's our way of making that clear, that it kind of keeps everyone happy. That's my personal opinion. Anyways, I think that's, the big crux of what I want to say. I watch council meetings, I watch committee meetings all the time, and the mics pick a lot up. I don't know if any of you actually go home and watch the videos, but we can hear a lot of things. So there is a lot of code of conduct behavior, and I'm really happy that Chair Bradley brought that up earlier, where we hear what people say. And I can't imagine sitting in a women's committee, advisory committee, and hearing the same kind of comments. You couldn't even get through a conversation about the creation of one without a back and forth. Barb, like, women need one space. We're asking for one space where we feel free and empowered to make those, to have those honest conversations, that you are better informed. Again, you guys get to vote at the end. We're not saying, we just want to make decisions for ourselves. We're saying that women are more likely to have an honest engagement and to feel empowered from this committee. And you might have a few people who wouldn't otherwise join. And that's all I'll say. There you go.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for our presenter?
I think Haley pretty much covered the question. I just wanted you all to consider that. I think that it's something that no one else was going to bring up, and I think it's an important point of view. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next presenter will be Sabrina Hill. I call her to the podium. She was on the Citizens Committee regarding members of council compensation. Welcome to Regional Council.
Thank you. Happy to be back. Thank you, Chair, Council, for adding me as a very late delegate and allowing me time to speak. If you'll indulge me for a few moments, I just want to point out some of the highlights of our recommendations from the CCCR, explain the rationale that went into our proposal, and address some of the concerns raised at corporate services. Our recommendations, given our mandate from Council, had attempted to create a simple, precise mechanism for establishing reasonable adjustments for Council going forward. As you can see from our calculations, are considerably lower than some of the increases in years past and in line with the Council-approved comparator group. An important aspect to our recommendation is that it is at arm's length and does not require the Council to revisit this controversial issue each year. Though, if new unforeseen circumstances were to happen, the policy could be amended or abandoned. Importantly, our recommendations correct some of the flaws in the former method used to establish wage increases, primarily the use of CPI and the Conference Board's average, which was based in some part on self-reporting, all of which are less transparent than our mechanism. The formula you'll be voting on shortly more accurately reflects the actual cost of labor increases year over year. Going into this process, I had in mind to place caps on council remuneration and tie any future increases to the same increase the unionized workers from the region received. However, after careful deliberation and examining scores of data carefully prepared by the very helpful region staff, my approach shifted to what is before you. Some of the concerns raised at the November 6th Corporate Services Committee meeting are as a result of some ambiguity of our terms of reference. Our final report is based on our interpretation of an ambiguous terms of reference from Council. I will not speak for my other committee members. I believe our scope was simply to determine a procedural mechanism for establishing wage increases going forward. It was not to determine whether the current remuneration was fair. Given that mandate, I think our proposal is sound. I came before council earlier this year with big signs in chambers rejecting the idea of wage increases. I truly believe that our recommendations from the committee is reasonable, fiscally responsible, and transparent. I've had an awakening. Given my past of believing I was always right, I have to admit that maybe that sign was a little bit harsh in the past. In closing, I commend and very much respect the councillors that, on principle, are voting against the new proposal because they believe they already receive reasonable compensation for their work. However, voting down these recommendations tonight may result in an administrative chaos and could even result in larger percentage increases in the future when future councils are forced to revisit this issue. With the chair's permission, I'm open to questions.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. And I see Councillor Yip would like to direct some questions. Councillor Yip.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just to clarify one of the points of discussion that happened at last week's Corporate Services meeting, you and I had engaged on social media about the recommendations. And then when I saw that you were present, I asked you and one of your committee colleagues the question that we had been discussing on Twitter. Can you speak to, as far as you can, to how the committee feels about the methodology being held off until the beginning of the next term of council?
Yeah, so of the three-person committee, I only feel comfortable speaking on behalf of two, myself and another, because I'm aware of his opinions on this. Him and I both feel that the recommendations that we proposed could be or should be held over until the next council.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of our presenter? If not, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. We are going to have a proposal now. Let's see, it's going to go up on your screen for a moment, and we need a mover and seconder, do we?
We don't need a mover and seconder.
Don't need a mover and seconder, okay. There's the motion on the floor. Please take a careful look at it.
Through you, Chair, just to confirm to committee, in accordance with Councillor Yip's reordering of the agenda, we are now considering minute item 5.4 out of the corporate services minutes. So what you see before you is what was approved at committee.
And I have names on the screen. Councillor Bilsma is first.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this. You know, I have some concerns, and they've been highlighted, and actually is by some of the other councillors have talked about this, the inclusivity of allowing men. My challenge is actually kind of from a system perspective. If we have an all women's committee, if we go down that road, pardon me, that we, in that sense, we're bound somehow. If they make recommendations or suggestions, and I don't know the form, the scope necessarily, but that somehow, if that is turned down, if the committee makes a recommendation and it's turned down by this council, and it could be a lousy idea, it could have merit, but whatever, after a discussion is turned down, that somehow we create then a polarization at that point, that somehow the label will go out to the regional council that it's just full of sexism and that's a little bit my concern from a perspective of an all-female committee making a recommendation to this council that somehow there's a hamstringing or an inability to speak. Even now, I'm uncomfortable speaking because in the main, you know, I respect my female counterparts. They're credible. They put themselves forward in a fair election, had the opportunity to run, and they were elected because of the merit that they brought to the table. And yet I have this exclusion presented to me. And then I think, well, how's that going to work out in practicality? So that's a concern that I'd like to address at this point. That the dialogue, in my opinion, is compromised. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Chair. I'll follow on that awkward dialogue by Councillor Bilsma. So just to reiterate, as written, the terms does not reflect an all-female membership, and I think I've made it clear I'm not in support of that, because I think we need to be inclusive in terms of our dialogue and how we engage society as a whole. But what I do want to amend, and one of the mandates is to promote leadership development that empowers women in Niagara to fully participate in civic life. So I think a fair amendment would to specify that there's preference for the chair and co-chair position to be female or identify as female. So I'm going to ask if we could please add that to the terms of reference or to the motion.
Do you need a seconder for that amendment? Seconder will be Councillor Butters. Okay, anyone wish, we're now into the amendment stage, so anybody wish to speak to the amendment? I see no one speaking to the amendment, so I guess we keep proceeding. We're going to vote on the amendment. If any comment on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? The amendment is carried. Now we'll continue the discussion. I see Councillor Senzik's name on the screen.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a question on the original motion, and I agree with the presenters and how they framed the discussion. I guess my only comment is, if I could see the motion again, it's around the council representation. So I do agree that the citizens at large, having language in there, as Ms. Spanton has talked about, that preference will be given to, and people identifying as female, that language should be in there. But it's the regional councillor appointments that I think we have to be cognizant of. And I say that because if we were to have an LGBTQ committee here, or an anti-racism committee, I look around the room, and if we went with the 4 regional councillors be appointed, and they all had to be of that, either LGBTQ or a person of color, there'd be no councillors that could sit on that committee, unless I'm misrepresenting anybody, and I apologize. But trying to shed light on the 4 regional councillors, so I think you'd have to open up a door there that if the regional councillors select, they're the ones who are going to choose from their members, whether or not they choose all women or they choose one man and 3 women, whatever it may be. I think the terms of reference, we can't limit it to women at the regional councillor level. That would be my concern. So using this as a frame point, if we were to create other committees, we wouldn't be able to have that language up there, that thou shalt be LGBTQ if you didn't have enough members of council. So the citizen appointments, I think having the language there is correct. But when it comes to regional councillors, we should be able to select amongst the group, and hopefully we'll make the right decision for the committee to have the right councillors at that. And I think Ms. Bateman was correct, and there is an opportunity where you may have an inappropriate councillor being appointed, but it would be the hope of this council that we make the right decisions to appoint the right people to the right committees. So I don't know through the clerk's office how you would address that. If we could separate that one out, that the regional councillors, that there is no direction, or that it'll be to the will of council as to who would be appointed, if it's the will of this council as well.
The clerk?
Through you, Chair, there's nothing currently in the terms of reference that speak to that the 4 regional councillors need to be women. The only caveat would be what we just included, which was that the chair be a woman, and we did put in the terms of reference that the chair must be a member of regional council.
Perfect. Fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Yip.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a few comments. I'm not going to argue against having men sit as members of a women's advisory committee. If I'm being completely frank, I can't imagine what men would have to offer to a women's advisory committee any more than I can imagine what I would have to offer to a men's health committee. So I would just like any men, whether they're in this room or listening, to just consider a few things before putting their names forward. The St. Catharines Committee has no men as members of their committee, and I actually couldn't find any women's committee that had men as members. Whether that's in their terms of reference or not is a different matter. Women in Niagara Council, which is a committee of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, has no men as members of their committee. The YWCA Board of Directors is made up entirely of people who identify as women, and when men have inquired as to why they are excluded, they feel they're being excluded, the response has been that when women's access to leadership roles is equal to that of men's access, then they'll consider having men sit on that board of directors. And I think that's a key point. Women have not had, and in many respects still don't have, the same access to that same level of representation in society. We also know from numerous research studies, which you can do just a simple Google search, that women don't speak as freely or as often when men are present, and that men, in fact, interrupt women 33% more often than they interrupt other men. Diversity of viewpoints on this committee is extremely important. I would think that we would want to ensure that we're hearing from women of color, trans women, women in same-sex relationships, women of various economic statuses, women of various physical and cognitive abilities, women of different age demographics, women who are parents, women who are not parents, and women. Ms. Bateman spoke to the intersectionality, who share several of those characteristics and also who maybe only identify with 1 or 2, as well as non-binary individuals. So I'd be disappointed if this committee didn't have a strong diversity of women's voices before having men on that committee as well. And as was pointed out by the delegates, the work, of course, of the Women's Advisory Committee has to come to a council that is already 75% men. To Councillor Billsma's point, I don't think that this committee is any different than any other advisory committee that we have. I mean, I chair the Accessibility Advisory Committee. If we voted down something they brought forward, I can't imagine there'd be, oh, this council was opposed to people with disabilities. But and I appreciate that some men want to be actively involved in supporting the Women's Advisory Committee. I think that's a good thing. But being an ally means listening more, talking less, being supportive, and I think most importantly, ensuring that you're not taking a seat away from someone who's impacted by the work that the committee would actually be trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Salepa.
I think it's really important to not recognize the role that women play in our staff. Regularly, I think this conversation here is interesting. I didn't expect it to be a conversation that I would be here to have. But I really, feel that it's being overlooked here. We have many great leaders, women leaders in our staff that impact what we do here very regularly, and they do it really well. So for me, I guess I hear regularly from people that, we should stay in our lane. And I'm not sure we're in our lane here. I feel like we're not. I want to say I've been involved with an international business organization for many years, and they brought together an international women's advisory council for the real estate community. There's over 300,000 members, and they have this committee, and they're very proud to include men in their ranks with that. And I really believe inclusivity is the answer moving forward for everything. And I don't understand. I guess I just don't understand that excluding people. So that's just my comments. And I'm also concerned about the amendment. I'm not so sure how legal that is, but I'll leave that for people to figure out. And
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. And the last point by Councillor Zalepa is what I want to bring up. I want to make sure that we're not exposing council to a legal challenge. We've already been told by legal that you can't put down there that it's only women on it. Now, if the odds are slim of a male coming on this board, and I agree with that. But what happens if he gets on there and he says, I was not selected for chair or vice chair because of this amendment put on there? Is that legal? Is this amendment legal?
Franco, I think they're looking for an
Yeah,
answer from you on
so
that.
through you, Chair, it's a very good question. I mean, the advice that we would normally give is that every person in Ontario has a right to equal treatment, right? And so the concern by, putting in things that would restrict or prohibit or introduce, obviously segregating who can be on committees and whatnot is not something that we would normally recommend. Again, what we should be doing is establishing the criteria in which you're looking for people to be on this committee in order for us to then assess and present back to you who we believe best meets the criteria to be on the committee, which I believe the terms of reference in the report has done. For us to then come back and allow council then to determine who ought to be on the committee based on staff evaluating against that criteria. So, Chair, I'm all for this, but not for that amendment. So I would have to vote no on that because I think that exposes us if that amendment stays the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to stand up and advise. I have one wife and I have two daughters and a daughter-in-law. I have one son-in-law to help me, and I am very fortunate that all of them are doing what they want to do, and they're very happy. And I believe that we need to go ahead with this project. In fact, I was supporting this motion when it was coming forward, when Councillor Houston brought it forward. And I still agree in it. And I'm not sure there is a place for a man or a male to be attending those meetings, but it is open. And if a individual wishes to put his name forward as well, and I'm all for it. And I think there is some good out of that, and that is that they're in discussion. A male perspective can assist as this committee goes forward and starts to implement and recommend to this council some of the actions that they believe we should be taking. And I commend the city of St. Catharines and the work they're doing, and just managed to get to read about it this week, and it really is a way to the future of allowing women to have more of a voice in what they're speaking. And certainly the ladies that we have sit around this council make sure they do. And I, for one, enjoy listening to that side of a discussion when we have it. So I'm all in favor of this, Mr. Chair, and oh, there is someone else who wants to speak, so I won't call for the question.
I will thank you for allowing Councillor Dart to speak. Councillor Dart.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies, thank you for your presentations. I have to concur with my colleague, Councillor Gale. I'm good with everything. I think it's a bad precedent, and I'm not so sure how we stand on legal grounds. And include considerations respecting selections of the chair and vice chair. So I will vote against it because of that, and only because of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we have voted on the amendment. The amendment has carried. So it would be voting
Chair,
now.
point of order. Did legal not say that we shouldn't have that in there and we're not considering taking it out? Okay.
Councillor Nicholson is speaking next.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps we could add, as a friendly amendment to that and include committee criteria considerations respecting selection of the chair and vice chair. So that would get us out of the selection of the vice chair or chair based upon gender alone, and it would look at the criteria of the committee, which is leadership and governance and those things that are listed there. So that might help, and I think that might be something that would keep us in compliance with the Human Rights Code.
Thank you, Councillor. What you have suggested may be contradicting the previously carried amendment. That's my only worry on that. So I'm going to go to our clerk and our legal to say what you proposed might be in opposition to, like it wouldn't be a friendly amendment, I don't think, but I'll ask the clerk to, and Franco perhaps to give us advice on that. Who wants to go first? Perhaps you could state it again,
Sure.
Councillor Nicholson, to be helpful here.
I would propose including the words committee criteria. So it goes and include committee criteria considerations respecting the selection of the chair and vice chair. So the committee criteria, I think there's 5 bullet points there. Governance, communication, negotiation skills, commitment to mentoring and empowering. That might help us achieve the same result, but at the same time, not exclude any particular gender.
So, Franco?
Yes, through you, Chair. I mean, that would be fine. I mean, that is the spirit and the intent, I believe, of how the terms of reference and the report is written. That, again, it would be anyone who applies to be part of the committee would be assessed against that criteria.
We'll need a seconder, first of all, for that, for Councillor Nicholson's. So Councillor Whalen is going to second it. Is it a friendly amendment? I have to ask Councillor Houston if she considers that to be a friendly amendment.
You know, I'm going to agree with that just because I really want this committee to move forward and I don't want to delay it any further, so I'm going to say yes.
So it is a friendly amendment, so I guess we'll call a vote on the amendment. Now, at that time, everybody understand the amendment? State it again for us, Councillor Nicholson, because everybody has to understand. Yes, and on the screen, I see. Councillor Gale has asked for it to be on the screen, and there it's going to be. So we'll ask for a vote on the amendment now. Any discussion on the amendment, first of all?
Can I just ask a procedural question on the amendment, since it was already
Question, okay, Councillor Sandzik.
It's just a procedural. Can we vote? Can we, in the Roberts rules, it's amending an amendment. So we've now entered into we had an amendment. Now we're amending an amendment, or is that just specifically when the amendment's on the floor? Okay.
Any discussion of this? So Councillor Yip has her hand up. I'm looking at the screen. Councillor Yip.
Sorry, I tried to join the amend list and I wasn't able to. I think that the only concern here then, and I mean, the Canadian Cancer Society, when they put out job postings, they say that actually smokers may not apply. So I don't think that this is as big a concern around exclusion as it's being made out to be. I think the concern with this amendment, I'm not saying I would necessarily vote it down, but include committee criteria considerations. When you look at those considerations, they're more likely to show up on a man's resume than a woman's resume, just again because of the challenges that we're already discussing.
Any other comments? If not, I will ask for a vote on the amendment by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by, I think, Councillor Whalen, was it? Yes. We have a request for a recorded vote. Okay.
On the amendment right now, not recorded.
Okay, we're voting on the amendment, not recorded. Thank you, Councillor Gale, for your help. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. I presume next I will be asking that you will vote on the motion as amended. Motion before you as amended. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we need to do the regional councillor appointments to the committee. I'll ask the chair how we should do this, whether it's by nomination or by hand up. Go ahead. Okay, any member who wishes to be considered to be nominated for this committee, any member of this council, please raise your hand.
I'm going to nominate Councillor Laura Ip.
Okay, we can do either way. Laura Ip's name is it okay? You consent to it?
Of course, thank you. I would like to nominate, of course, Councillor Houston.
Councillor Houston has been nominated.
I'll nominate Councillor Butters.
Councillor Butters has been nominated. Councillor Dart.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Easton.
Councillor Easton has declined. We have three. Councillor Furtick. Would you have to consent? She would have to consent. That's a very good gesture. She would have to consent. The clerk is going to give us some help here.
Through you, Chair. So the terms of reference for the committee say up to 4 regional councillors, and as you know, at any time, councillors can be added to a committee. So if Councillor Villela expressed her desire to sit on the committee, we could certainly appoint her at a later date if she wanted, and just stick with the 3 that we have currently, unless there are others.
And are there any other members of council who might wish to be Councillor Whalen?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Greenwood.
Councillor Greenwood, would you serve? Councillor Greenwood has declined. So we have 3 this evening. If there's a 4th that you would like to nominate, fine. If not, we can nominate a 4th person at a subsequent meeting. Mover and seconder for this motion. Councillor, let's say Steele, Councillor Ugolini. For these appointments, that Councillors Houston, Yip, and Butters be appointed to the Women's Advisory Committee. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Now we're going to do the other corporate services committee item, and the clerk will put that on the screen for us. Any speakers to this item? Councillor Senzik. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I really appreciated Sabrina Hill's presentation tonight, and it really encourages me to look to amend this motion. She made it pretty clear that 2 out of the 3 on that committee should be held over to the next term. I think we should be following Chair Bradley's lead on this, and all these changes I think are really good, solid changes. I think it's a simple, precise method, but I think it should kick in on the December 1st, 2022 in the next term. And so my amendment would be that that's what would happen. I think Laura Yip said she would second that motion of amendment.
Councillor Redicott.
Just to the amendment, Chair. Well, I'm looking at the recommendations contained in the report. And the recommendations were approved and signed by each member of this committee. And the 4th recommendation is that the new methodology remain in place and be applied annually on December the 1st until such time as Regional Council directs a change to the methodology. That's the written word. If that's what 2 of the 3 committee members didn't intend, they shouldn't have signed this document, or they should have added something to indicate that it should be deferred to the next council. So I must say that in law, one relies more on the written word than the verbal comment, and so I won't support the amendment.
Well, shall I ask for the mover and secretary to send an official amendment to clerk? It is. So Councillor Butters has made that amendment. Is there a seconder for her amendment? Councillor Yip. Okay, we're speaking to that now, and we've already had one speaker. That is Councillor Redicott. Councillor Yip is next, and then Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I won't say very much of what I already said at Corporate Services last week, except to say that 2 members of the committee did make it clear that they were fine with this being moved to the beginning of the next term of council. And Sabrina Hill spoke this evening to some ambiguity in their terms of reference, and that's so they weren't clear that they could make a timeline suggestion so much as just a methodology change. And I'm just gonna, the one thing I will repeat is, we're in a very difficult budget year. We're looking at a lot of very difficult things, and I think, saying to the citizens of Niagara that we will not vote in favor of things that personally and directly benefit us, I think is something that they would like to see from this council.
Councillor Rigby.
Mr. Chair, we spent a lot of time on this at Corporate Services, and we had the committee there. Their recommendation was to start, and it seems strange to me that after the fact we're finding out that 2 of the 3 don't agree, and they should have been telling us that then. Although I don't see any issue with not taking it, but I think you're asking for trouble going to the end of this term and then trying to determine what dollar figure is going to be the next term of office. And I also include in that the chairs, because somewhere along the line we have to identify what the chair's remuneration should be, and it should be before that time, with all due respect to the chair. And so I have no issue with waiting till the end of this year, but we need to take place and indicate what that next year is going to be and vote on it and put it in place so there's no further discussion. So if it helps to, I can't put an amendment on top of the amendment, so I'm going to have to vote against this amendment and bring forward a suggestion to start in the 2021 year in order to get it started properly and it moves through the process of terms that's called. And I will not vote for that amendment as it stands. Thank you.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just to the committee member that's here, thank you for your work, and the other members that aren't here this evening. Port Colborne went through a very similar situation approximately 10 years ago where we had a citizens committee. And I spoke about this here before when I proposed getting this committee moving. And I think the point I take out from the speaker this evening was the fact that she said regarding unknown or higher pay raises to councillors and the chair at future dates. What we did in Port Colborne was we implemented it at the end of that year, very similar to what they're doing here. It hasn't been brought up since. And it's a number that stays fairly the same every year. The public doesn't come at us with regards to whether Port Colborne is overpaid or not overpaid, and things like that. We are going back out to a citizens committee again, but on a whole myriad of issues, remuneration is one of those. But we've asked them to do a job. They've come back. The committee has come forth with a recommendation. I agree with Councillor Rigby where this is putting it to bed. It's in a reasonable number because I don't want to come here next year and we're arguing whether it's X percent or Y percent or whatever it is. I want to see it put to bed so that it's done, over with, and we all know going forward where we stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Height.
Yes, just to comment Councillor Yip made, that they didn't deal with the timeline. Well, I'm reading the motion, and the timeline was really clear, not to be retroactive December 1st, 2018. That's one timeline they used. And the second was to start on December the 1st, which is another timeline. So they did give us a timeline instead of saying not till 2022. So there's timelines in their motion, and if they weren't in favor of that, as Councillor Redekop said, they should have said the timeline for any raise should be on December 1st, 2022, and they didn't. They said this year.
Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak in support of this motion in that I don't, in support of this amendment in that I don't feel that a raise this year is important. At least it's not to me. But what is important is that we do have a policy in place so that the future councils don't have to go through this very divisive debate every year. And as long as we have in place the methodology, as it says here, and as long as we know what the methodology is, then as long as it's in place before the next excuse me, before the next council, then I'm happy with that. So I'm speaking in favor of this amendment.
I see no other names. The change is what you see in bold print. The change to the original says effective with the new term of council December 1, 2022. So that's the amendment you're voting on, whether you want to wait until December 1 of 2022 or make it effective starting next year. I think that's what the issue is here. So any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Encina.
Thank you, Chair. I look at how many times we've asked groups to go, or committees, struck a committee to say, please look this up, work at it, then come back to us and tell us what you believe we should do. And again, a committee has gone, they have come back, and they have said, this is what we should do. If we have that 1.5%, if I feel if I don't need it, if I believe I should donate it, then I will donate it. But they've come back to us and said, listen, this is what we've asked them to do, and now they're coming back. The timelines, again, were there. They signed the document, as Mayor Redekop said. So I understand that there are difficult times ahead of us, and there are going to be as we progress further. But who's to say that those difficult times aren't going to get worse in 2022 or even as we go along? So I think we really have to take a look at, we asked these people to do a job for us. They took their time. They spent their hours doing it. I think we should listen to what they have said and perhaps vote accordingly.
Thank you. Councillor Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My button's not working for some reason. I agree with this amendment. Can we scratch the in brackets, including the regional chair option number 3 also, for terms going forward.
Would you clarify that?
Got to get the regional chair in line with the council of the date effective next term.
Oh. So you're removing the
The part in brackets, including the
number
regional
5,
chair.
or in brackets somewhere.
Because you
including
scratch
the
regional
chair,
chair
the
off the
councillor,
number 5.
Yeah. You need a seconder?
No, I just want to clarify.
Okay, the clerk is going to clarify.
Through you, Chair. If we take that out, Councillor Whalen, that will mean that the adjustment does not affect the regional chair going forward at any point in time until the methodology comes back.
Does that not mean we'll put the regional chair on board with the rest of council effective December 1st, 2022?
Correct. The regional chair would then be eligible for that increase
That's
at
right.
that point in time.
That's right.
So you want it removed?
If I get that firmly amended, it'd be appreciated.
Councillor Yip has a question.
Yeah, just to clarify, because I'm reading this, so initially, point number 5 said the new methodology be applied to the regional chair's remuneration effective the next term. With the amendment that Councillor Butters and I have made, or requested, we're asking for the methodology to be effective for the new term of council, including the regional chair, which is why number 5 is struck from the motion, and now item 3 reads that essentially every member of regional council, including the regional chair, would have their raise effective the new term of council. So I think what you're asking for is actually accomplished. I think your line of thinking, including the regional chair, removing that would mean essentially the regional chair may never get a raise.
Yeah, I just want to see him get it. Through you, Mr. Chair, just that you're on board or future
Point of order, Chair. Shouldn't the councillors be standing at a regular council meeting?
Just want to get everybody on the same board, the whole council inclusive of the regional chair next.
And it appears that the motion does that, the amendment does that. So any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment? Recorded vote. All in favor of the amendment?
Vote is open.
The amendment is defeated. We'll now be going to the, yeah, I did not vote. It is still defeated. My name should not appear. I don't vote unless there's a tie, I'm told. So the motion is defeated. We now go to the full motion, the original motion. Any further discussion there? If not, I will ask for a vote on the motion. Oh, I see several names. Are they still on? Okay, I have Councillor Redekop again. Passed. Councillor Rigby again. Councillor Edgar. Okay. Councillor Encina. Councillor Whalen. So all declared up. Councillor Height. Pass. Okay. So we have the motion before us now. And we're going to have a recorded vote apparently.
Vote is open.
The motion is carried. So I think next we go to adoption of minutes. The next is item 10.1, council minutes, CL 17, 2019. That was the Thursday, October 17 special meeting. And the 10.2 is the council minutes of regular council, Thursday, October 17, 2019. Councillor Bilsma.
Thank you. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Zalepa that the minutes of CL 17-2019 be in the open and closed session minutes of the Special Regional Council and minutes CL 18-2019 be in the open session minutes of the regular Regional Council meetings held on Thursday, October 17, 2019 be adopted.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next item is correspondence. CLC 71-2019, report on code of conduct complaint IC-920619. I call on Councillor Hewson for the motion.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Yip, that report PDC 11-2019. Oh, no, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. Seconded by Councillor Yip, that the items to be received and or referred be dealt with as noted in the council agenda and if issued agenda.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now for consideration is the regional participation in a brownfield tax assistance program incentive for the city of Welland. I call on Councillor Junkin for the motion.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Foster, I'm sorry. The correspondence item CLC 72-2019, respecting regional participation in a brownfield tax assistance program incentive in the city of Welland be received, and that regional council approve funding subject to the approval of a bylaw by the city of Welland and execution of an agreement which provides tax assistance to include a freeze on the taxes levied for municipal purposes by the region, effective only for the duration of the rehabilitation period to a maximum of 3 years, or until eligible rehabilitation costs have been reached on the property known municipally as 240 Denniston, City of Welland, under the Brownfield Tax Assistance Program.
Thank you. Any speakers to the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The next committee reports, open session, Public Works Committee of November 5, 2019. I call on Councillor Rigby for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Edgar that report PWC 11-2019 being the open and closed sessions of minutes of the Public Works Committee meeting held on Tuesday, November 5th, 2019 be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor DeZero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is an item in the closed session of the Public Works Committee reports that I'd like to address Council on.
I will check with the clerk to see whether that's possible now that was from closed session. And Councillor DeZero would like to address a matter that was in camera. Is that permitted?
Yes, so we'll just remove the closed minutes from here and we'll deal with those in closed session. That will cover it off.
Thank you. Councillor Encina.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to lift PW 64-2019 for discussion and hopefully an amendment. PW 64
2019.
We deal with that right now?
The Vision
Okay,
Zero
would you like
road.
to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. What I've actually put forward is I'm looking at including, as we talked about the Vision Zero road safety. We brought it up at committee, but obviously it didn't get through, or how it was missed on my part. That I included, and I would like to include, the community safety zones and school bus stop arm cameras pursuant to Bill 174, Ministry of Transportation recommendations. I'd like to add that to paragraph 1.
Would you state that again for us?
It's,
Okay.
I sent it to the.
Give it up there, thank you.
And also, in the second paragraph, that regional staff be authorized to initiate discussions with regional school bus services providers and the stop arm camera technology vendors. The reason I'm asking for
And
this.
as you say that, I'll look for a seconder.
Right.
And as Councillor Diodati is seconding it, go ahead now.
Thank you, Chair. Through what I'm suggesting through this, it's a no cost really to the region. By going out, having staff look for vendors who will put these cameras on. We already have an agreement coming through with regards to red light cameras and everything else. So it's a no cost, virtually no cost. If anything, it's a revenue generation for the region through the. So what it is they're putting a camera. I believe every day I'm not sure, I believe it was 3,500 to 5,000 students get on buses every day in this region. I believe there's 2.5 buses that are passed while the arms are out, while the red lights are flashing. People don't care, they're not paying attention. So what I'd like to see is if we can, with regards to the Vision Zero road safety program, this is just an addition to that. I think not only is it going to help drivers be aware, but it's also going to help our kids. A lot of times kids have to cross a street where there's more than 2 lanes. That becomes problematic. It's done right now through the states, I believe Hamilton is soon to adopt it. So I really believe is to put it forward, have staff take a look at it, come back to us, and that's really what this is all about. Come back to us and say, yeah, this is going to work for us, and this is how we can do it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comment on that? Councillor Diodati.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm happy to support and second that. You know, the stat he just mentioned, 2.5 blow-bys per day in Mississauga. So with the thousands of kids getting on the buses every day, it's a no-brainer. And we're shooting for revenue neutral. This can be revenue positive. So it's really a no-brainer. Caledon and Brampton both unanimously approved that. And I would hope that we would too. I can't see one reason why we wouldn't. So I'm happy to second that. Thank you, Chair.
So that is an amendment to the main motion here. Any other discussion on the amendment to the main motion? If not, all in favor of the amendment? Is carried. So we now go to the full motion, and I have Councillor Ugolini.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just under other business, the traffic assessment item. It was traffic and speed assessment that I brought up. So can I just have the speed addressed in that as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to vote on that as an amendment. Okay, it's an amendment to it. Who said? Oh, sorry. Okay, we just allow that to happen without an amendment. That's fine. So I know you're going to say there's special consideration for some, but it's not true. Anyway, we're now voting on the motion as amended. Mr. Diodati has a comment.
No, just real simple, Chair. I'm just asking that it be recorded so that we can send a message to everyone that hopefully we're going to be unanimous as all the other regions as well.
And Councillor Diodati has asked for a recorded vote on the motion that you see before us as amended.
Vote is open.
Motion is carried, as amended, is carried unanimously. No. And now the balance of the open session recommendations. Are before you any speakers to this? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Public health, thanks. Okay, we're now going to public health. 12.2. I call on Councillor Greenwood for the motion.
That 2019 be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Gale.
Chair, just a quick one. On item 7.3, Mayor Diodati and I were both there at the Niagara Falls Volunteer Appreciation Night. Thank you. Matter of fact, we outnumbered the Niagara Falls councillor, Jim.
That is worthy of note. Thank you, Councillor Gale. Councillor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make reference to PHD 20-2019, the EMS, where are we now? The Niagara Emergency Medical Services System Transformation Update 2. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make a comment about the quality of this transformation, and because it does directly impact public health, but it also has reallocated non-life-threatening and urgent care to more appropriate care providers, and was shown to be cost-effective. Those scales are going in the right direction. And I am so taken with the early results of this and the way in which this has been carried forward over a longer period of time with the kind of research, international research that took place. It is a very credible, I believe, long-term cost management strategy. And it does fit in very well. It appears to fit in very well with the provincial request to find efficient and effective delivery models. Furthermore, the structure of the transformation creates auditable tracking and regular reporting. So my question to the CAO, through you, Mr. Chairman, is how many other opportunities will we have for a model of this type to be implemented I'm going to say over the term of this council, because I realize they are complex and have many elements to them.
CAO.
Through Chair, just to the question, are you speaking specifically to EMS or public health? Or
yes. I'm speaking to EMS, but I'm looking for other considerations that you and the senior management team are giving to this type of model, this approach to be used in a number of other areas of the operations. Not in public health, but specifically, but in other departments.
CAO.
Through you, Chair, perhaps I could get back to the councillor just to cut off guard there in terms of, just not top of mind right now, a comparable sort of innovative, different approach to service delivery. But perhaps I can follow up with a response to the councillor.
All right, Mr. Chairman, let me be just a little bit more specific. I don't view budgeting as something that uses an eraser, and I think that the EMS team recognized that they needed to make some major changes in order for patient care to be managed differently in the future and in an affordable way, and they're certainly moving in the right direction. And so when we have reports come forward that are really only asked to find savings, it's not very helpful because there's no impact analysis on the community. So I'm taking advantage of the opportunity to talk about this because it's in the minutes, and therefore it's fair game for discussion. But I really believe that we can do a much better job than just getting out an eraser. And they have done it here, and I could see this being used in other departments. So I would be interested, Mr. Chairman, in knowing what the CAO has in mind.
CAO.
Through you, Chair, and thank you. I understand the question better. And my answer to the councillor and council would be, that's the discussion that we had last Thursday. Although largely focused on financial concerns, when we come back to council, we hope to bring a broader story in terms of impact to community. So that is the subject of the discussion last Thursday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, but I just want to reinforce that this is certainly a model that's worth considering.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. It's Councillor Senzik.
Thank you, through the chair. Just I just want to draw council's attention to COM C6-219, which is the Niagara Regional Housing. We have our CEO here, Donna, is in attendance. And on Tuesday, Niagara Falls approved the bylaw to allow for Hawkins Dell to move forward. And that's a 73-unit affordable housing complex that's being built as an infill in Niagara Falls. You know, Councillor Zalepa, Councillor Butters, and Councillor Villela are on the board of Niagara Regional Housing, and Councillor Insignia, who's been leading the charge of trying to get a lot of these projects out of the ground. And I just want to draw council's attention to the fact it's a good news story, and for Niagara Falls, it's long overdue. I think they've got about 3,000 people on the waiting list, and the greatest number of those are the one bedrooms, and this has about 40 to 50% one bedroom, and then two bedroom and a couple of three bedrooms. So great news story. I want to share it with council, and it's just pointing to the work that our Niagara Regional Housing staff are doing, trying to address the housing issue in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Senzik. So all in favor, I guess we had an all in favor now? There it is. The report being the open session minutes of public health officers. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next is the Corporate Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, November 6, 2019. Councillor Foster for the motion.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. So a much pared down Corporate Services Committee meeting minutes. I have a motion moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Junkin. That reports CSC 11-2019 being the open session minutes of the Corporate Services Committee meeting held on Wednesday, November the 6th, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion? Councillor Yip.
Thank you. There's an item in the closed session minutes that I'd like to lift for discussion later.
Clerk?
No.
Through you, Chair, there were no closed session minutes. Corporate Services Committee did not resolve into closed session.
Okay, we had an item that was in closed session that was correct, but we didn't resolve into closed session. Correct. I'm suggesting that maybe I would like to do that now. So how do we?
So when we get to closed session on the agenda, then we can include that item as one of the discussion items we're going to go into close on.
Okay.
No.
Thank you to the clerk. Councillor Foster.
Just a quick comment is that this is just the open session item minutes, okay?
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Very good. Okay. So all in favor? I think we did that, didn't we? Yeah. No? Okay, we have a hand up. Councillor Senzik, it's not working? Okay. There, just come on the screen.
So if I just want to speak to CLK 14-219, which is the Schedule A, and it's the removing of the reimbursement for mayors of any conferences. So that's an addition that was added into the ineligible expenses. And I just want to draw the attention of council at large to that removal out of that Schedule A, as it is a concern of mine. And it's a concern because there would be at times conferences that would be of a regional nature that may not pertain to a town or a city, but is more of a maybe it's on the Great Lakes and it's about the
the water quality management, and you want to go there as a regional councillor. And what this amendment is essentially saying is that if you're a mayor, you don't matter, only if you're a regional councillor. And I think you're creating a two-tier structure there. I'm uncomfortable with that. It's not something that we should be moving towards. And I would hope that council would support us. We're all equals around this table, and being able to have those expenses included in there allows for everybody to make a decision as to what conferences they feel that they want to go and contribute. And I will say that going to AMO, when you look at the mayors that go there with the regional councillors, we're going there advocating for the region. And so what you're essentially saying here is that while we want you to come and advocate, regional council or regional expenses are ineligible. And that's not something that I think we as a council should be going down that road. It's a slippery slope, and it's one that I'm uncomfortable with. So I'll be voting against. I'll be asking for an amendment to remove that. So if I could make that as a motion to remove.
Moving the amendment is
that.
seconded by Councillor Redekop is seconding it.
Thank you.
And he's going to speak now.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I support the comments made by Mayor Senzik. I mean, the reality is, some of the mayors may charge the region for going to AMO. Some, like I, don't, never have. But there are a number of conferences that we all go to, and sometimes we try to spread around the cost, particularly when we go to a conference and attend meetings with ministers or other dignitaries. If we're representing the region, I don't see why the region wouldn't be helping to cover the cost of that. And we do. We participate in many of the regional delegations at AMO. I don't know where this would go, starting to segregate mayors from the councillors. I was told that there was an issue because in the past, some mayors or councillors have tried to double dip region, conservation authority, municipality. If that's the problem, then focus on the problem. But don't start trying to create two tiers of councillors. What's next? I have to give my iPad back and get one from the town? The chair says yes. We can only sit on certain committees. I mean, I think it's unfortunate, particularly at a time when the nature of the relationship between the region and the local municipalities has never been better, and it's very strong. I'd hate to see something like this interfere with that.
Thank you, Councillor Redekop, who seconded the motion, and it's Councillor Height speaking now.
Yes, I'm liking what I'm hearing because there isn't a two-tier system here. Mayor Senzik, even though he's a mayor, has one vote here as a councillor. Councillor Height, who's only a councillor, has one vote here. So we are equal here. And I have no problem paying the expenses of our mayor to represent the region anywhere he goes when he's representing us. And as Councillor Redekop said, when he's going to AMO on behalf of the city and not the region, he puts a bill against the city. I trust the people around here. The last 4 years, I wouldn't have necessarily trusted them. But this group I do trust, so I support having the mayors being able to put their expenses against the region.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Yip.
I just want to provide some clarification as far as what happened at Procedural Bylaw Review Committee, which I sit with Councillor Height, Councillor Foster, Councillor Rigby, Councillor Greenwood. I think that's all of us. The original request, which was my request, was that mayors shall travel to conferences at the cost of their municipality unless it is a conference that falls specifically within the mandate of the region, for instance, public health. Somehow through discussion that day, it got changed to no conferences would be eligible. And I would like to see it returned to, right, if it's a public health conference, that's not specific to the city's mandate, right? It's the region's mandate. So I guess, I suppose I'm speaking in favor of the amendment. I just wanted to provide that background clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I don't think this was intended to make a two-tier system in any way, shape, or form. But I think in hearing what people are saying, let's face it, we've kind of, I like the term self-flagellated ourselves a lot. We have expense policies that are putting everything that we do online. Everybody can see exactly every nickel that we are spending on behalf of the taxpayers of Niagara region. I believe your cities are doing the same thing, that you have to go and do the thing. So I think this will sort itself out You know, if Mayor Easton is charging everything to the region, I'm sorry, I'm using a Mayor Easton. But if she's charging everything to the region and not to the town, that will show up. People will complain. So I happen to think that, I hate agreeing with you two mayors, but I'll agree with you on that. So.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the reason why we're having difficulty getting in is we're on the amendment speak list. But that's not why I stood up. In deference or, you know, in support of our mayors, even if it is a health issue, the reality is our mayors have that responsibility. It is their job and in their community to make sure that the health of their community is looked after. And so I have no issue with what the amendment or this motion is that we're coming forward with, because I think that mayors, if they're going to an AMO conference and they're going on behalf of their community, that's one thing. But if they're going on behalf of their community and also working with the region on other issues, you might even want to find a way to split that. And so I certainly think that this is the way we should be going. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, Councillor Mayor Rigby did such a great job of saying what I was going to say. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
So, are there any other speakers to this? We have an amendment that has been duly moved and seconded. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we vote on the motion as amended. And I see a lot of speakers. I guess, are you all spoken already? Okay, so we don't have to have speakers. Motion is amended. All in favor? Opposed? I can ask the clerk whether it's sufficiently clear.
Through you, Chair, we'll fix it, but I know what you mean. You want the reference that mayors not be reimbursed for expenses come out of the ineligible expenses. I've got you.
So no one objects to the amendment that is the adjustment that will be made by the clerk. Thank you. So the next motion is going to be, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. The balance of the recommendations from that committee. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next is the Planning and Economic Development Committee, I believe. Wednesday, November 5, 2019. I'm going to call on Councillor Hewson for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Steele, that report PEDC 11-2019 being the open session minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting held on Wednesday, November the 6th, 2019 be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next is the Committee of the Whole minutes, Thursday, November 7, 2019. I call on Councillor Reddekopp for the motion.
I move, seconded by Councillor Height, that report COTW 9 for 2019 being the open and closed session minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on Thursday, November 7th, 2019 be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? Councillor Sendzik.
Through the chair, just quickly, to the CAO, there will be a further follow-up to the KPMG report. And I asked that question because I think the characterization of the report in the media was somewhat lacking of the information that was actually provided the night of the Committee of the Whole. So will there be an opportunity to have KPMG come back and talk in a bit more detail, or at least look at the extended analysis of the impact that CIP programs have in communities across Niagara?
CAO.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, yes, there will be. They'll be finalizing the report, which could be in December, but more than likely in January. They'll present that, and there'll be that conversation.
And as a follow-up through the chair, can the CEO make sure that through the planning staff that there is an economic development, that there is a fulsome report that accompanies it that looks at the impact of CIP? Because again, I think the mischaracterization in the media was that the CIP has no impact on assessed value across the region. And I think in communities from Fort Erie to, say, Catharines to Niagara on the Lake and Port Colborne and all in between, that we can demonstrate that the CIP programs have actually increased the assessed values of targeted areas that were the net benefit of the community improvement program. So if we can see that through the chair to the CAO, that'd be a great addition so that the local media can report on that as well.
Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just have I'm confused. And since I had declared a conflict and left and was not present for the closed session, I'm going to choose to eliminate myself from the vote on this. So I'm just going to push my off button because I don't want to be voting yay or nay on this because I wasn't around to see what went on in that closed session. So I'm not voting on it.
Thank you for that clarification. I have Councillor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, I would like clarification through you to the CAO. It was my understanding, and the question was asked several times during committee, in regard to the purpose of the KPMG review. And the gentleman, the presenter, made it very clear that he was only to be looking at those opportunities where money could be saved. He was not looking at impact. He was not interested in anything else except providing us with a list of areas that should be targeted to save money. And I've forgotten the number, 5 or 6. If I'm wrong about that, I really do need to be corrected because at the present time, this is exactly what I was talking about. This is a very cut and dried report that came. It doesn't provide us with any useful data to go forward and make decisions from, except in terms of, yes, if you want to save some money, here's a place to do it. Here's a few places to do it. But there was no impact analysis. And he made it very clear that was not his job. That was not his mandate. And so I think we do need some clarification, Mr. Chairman.
CAO.
Through you, chairs, as the council will recall in the discussion, and yes, I agree, he made it very clear that was the scope of work that he'd undertaken. There would be further analysis, but council actually approved direction for staff to do our own further analysis, talk about community impacts and implementation or transition plans and what the impacts of those would be. So that work is to be done partly through the consultant, but partly through staff as well, or an extension of the consultant's assignment on the specific topics that we discussed that night.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. We have a motion before us, duly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next is a Chief Administrative Officer's report. CAO, do you have anything to say? There's a video coming up. Strategic plan video. We all know these videos always work when you call on them.
Through you, Chair. We have
CAO.
Through you, Chair. We have prepared a video that speaks to and highlights the council's strategic plan. I apologize to take responsibility. I think in preparation for today's meetings, we didn't actually coordinate it for viewing today, but I will get that to council.
Shall I still call on Councillor Butters for the motion? So Councillor Butters has a motion.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Galini that reports CAO 15-2019 respecting council's strategic plan video be received for information.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Under motions, number 14, there are no motions. Then 15, notices of motion. Councillor Diodati.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would ask the clerk if she could help me through this process. I do have a notice of motion that will require suspending the rules of order for our procedural bylaw in order to move this forward in a timely manner and fashion. You put them together, and it's manner. It's a new word. So just for a little bit of background, through you, Chair, I received a call from the CAO of Sturgeon County. Sturgeon County is a community just outside Edmonton, metropolitan Edmonton. The area there is made up of 13 communities, and the CAO was the CEO of the Niagara Parks Commission. So he's gone back out west, and they reached out to us and they said, they're having a lot of challenges in Alberta, as you know. They're feeling a little alienated after the federal election. They're feeling detached from the rest of us. They're having challenges with the depressed oil prices and a battered economy. So they had this feel-good idea that was completely non-political. And the idea was that maybe we could stitch the provinces together with a little video greeting, with maybe where the chair would perhaps, with all of us behind him, would offer some friendly greeting from all of us here in Niagara to all of our friends in Alberta, and maybe we would hold signs like little hearts or something like that. I'm not really sure. Haven't really thought that, although we'll blow kisses. I don't know, but open to interpretation. But that's the idea. And but to do this, if I've got this right, the rules of procedural order would be that we need a 2/3 majority to do that. So I'm going to ask if you'd be willing to do that, and then we can give the chair authorization to do this, and we could collectively do this feel-good gesture as a region. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Redekop is seconding the motion. Discussion. The motion here is that the notice requirements under section 18(1) of the procedural bylaw be waived to permit the consideration of a motion from Councillor Diodati with respect to illustrating our support for other municipalities and all communities in Canada. That is a permission we're looking for the procedural bylaw to be waived. Any discussion of that? Is there allowed to discuss on that? There is. Anybody want to discuss that? If not, Councillor Rigby does. Councillor Rigby.
Mr. Chair, although I do support Councillor Diodati, the previous council that I served in, we had this kind of thing happen to us a couple of times, where we had to react and act on issues that turned out to be really problems and accusations. And so I'm always hesitant to try and react as quickly. I certainly understand what's going on in Alberta, and it's not one of those things that would cost us a whole bunch of money in the long run. So I just want to send out that message to all of us that we shouldn't be reacting right away. We need to have time to think about what we're doing on things that really count as far as our taxpayers and what we have. But I support this motion, and I'll certainly vote for it because my friend in front of me, who I have known quite a while. Anyway, certainly will support that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other people want to discuss this? If not, the motion for procedural bylaw to be waived. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now, the motion now is that Regional Council join together to tape a group video message to be shared with Sturgeon County, Alberta, to illustrate our support for other municipalities and all communities in Canada. Seconder for that motion was Councillor Redekop, who's now going to speak.
Chair, when are we doing this? Next Thursday?
Thank you for that question. I know originally the chair suggested that. My concern was, what if everyone doesn't show up versus a regular meeting? But I mean, if we're going to have the majority of people here on Thursday, I don't know. I mean, we could do it Thursday. What are your thoughts on attendance? Could we ask if they intend to be here, Chair?
I'll ask the clerk what she thinks of this. Put her on the spot. Is that possible for what Councillor Diodati has asked?
Through you, Chair, from an attendance standpoint, I don't believe we've had any regrets at this point for next week's meeting. However, I'm not sure, how much lead time communication staff needs to put something like this together.
I have Councillor Redekop, Councillor Easton, and Councillor Gibson. Councillor Redekop. He's done. Councillor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, we really haven't had a group picture since all year, and we generally do one at least a couple of times during the term. And if we did that and we wore or had big signs that said one team on them, when we sang "O Canada" with Barb Greenwood, with Councillor Greenwood leading it, I mean, as you say, Councillor Bradley, nobody can beat us. I think we could generate a tremendous amount of energy and good feelings. What do you think, Councillor?
And if you did it on the, before I get to Councillor Gibson, who's next, if you did it on the last meeting before Christmas, you might be able to provide some holiday greetings to go along with that. And Councillor Diodati is a genius when it comes to promotion. Councillor Gibson.
Actually pull this off because somebody has to go find an old-fashioned videotape machine, unless they got one at home, maybe. So can we change that word to record, perhaps, or something a little more modern?
I think all he's looking, that makes sense. All he's looking for is something that is a video.
Yeah, but thank you.
Thank you for your help, though. Councillor Rigby.
Oh, thank you. I think the idea of doing O Canada in our Canadian suits would be good for, Block Alberta program that they're starting out there. So, we got a Block Quebec, and now we're going to have a Block anyway. I think next Wednesday, Thursday would be terrific.
If you leave it up to the chair and the clerk to determine whether next Thursday or the subsequent Thursday would be best. Is that okay with you, Councillor Diodati? Okay. How many people are not here next Thursday? There's a couple not here. So you may be, so thank you for that. We will actually do a canvass so we can get as many people as possible. Councillor Dart is trying to press his button, it won't work. Call the question, he says. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now, where am I in this list? Other business. Are there any other business limited to announcements? Oh, I see Redekop, Councillor Redekop has something.
You looked right at me under notices of motion.
That's right, yeah, I ignored you.
I know that Councillor Diodati distracted you. I'd like to give notice that the next regular council meeting, I'm bringing a motion for council to direct staff to prepare a report regarding the establishment, along with recommendations, of a whistleblower policy.
Good idea.
Whistleblower policy,
yes?
Yes.
Okay, that's, notice has been given, notice of motion. That's, doesn't require anything else other than giving notice. So I now have on the screen Councillor Witteveen, and I have a couple other councillors with hands up. Councillor Witteveen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I was going to talk about other business. I was going to discuss other business, but Councillor Redekop jumped the gun here, so I'll wait my turn.
Oh, he's finished. Councillor Redekop has completed his remarks, so Councillor Witteveen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to inform Council of a couple things. The Niagara North and Niagara South Federation of Agriculture in January 2020 will be amalgamated into a single agriculture entity representing approximately 1,500 family farms here in Niagara. So that's a move in I guess in consolidation and pooling our resources
so that we could be a stronger group. And second, I wanted to inform council that it's been long awaited. I did apply for the position on the Niagara Escarpment Commission, and we will be meeting in January. They're just waiting to select the chair, so I will be representing the Niagara region on the Niagara Escarpment Commission.
Congratulations, Councillor Whittleby. Councillor Yip has an announcement.
Thank you through you, Chair. I just want to bring everyone's attention to the Indigenous Rights Conference that's taking place from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. this Saturday, November 16th, at the Marilyn I. Walker School of Fine and Performing Arts. As many of you know, our Indigenous friends and neighbors have been subjected to racism for exercising their treaty rights and hunting deer at Short Hills. I want to thank Mayor Senzik, MPPs Jeff Birch, Sam Oosterhoff, and Wayne Gates, and MP Chris Biddle, and anyone else I might be missing, for standing with me to call out the racism that our Indigenous friends and neighbors have been experiencing. I'd encourage everyone here to drop into the conference anytime Saturday. It's open to the public, free to attend, and you don't have to register. Stop in anytime between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. To learn more about the Six Nations' right to hunt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purdick.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Last week we had a KPMG report. Is it possible, could staff please tell us how many more kind of reports that they have gone out and requested, to maybe give us an idea as to, are there any other reports coming forward that is going to slap us in the head like this last one did? I would appreciate it if we had some sort of idea if there is any more reports coming forward.
CAO.
Through you, Chair, the report that council received is something that council directed us to do. And it's, I believe, the only outstanding major consulting assignment that we have at the moment. There will be a final report.
I don't recall it coming to council, but that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Ugolini.
Through you, Mr. Chair, on a more festive note, this Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 4 o'clock, the Thorold Annual Arts and Crafts Show at Thorold High School takes over the whole school, and it's run by Kathy Henderson. It's a great event. Thousands of people show up in Thorold for that event. And to piggyback on that, our seniors run their bazaar up the street, as well as Cobblestone Gardens. So it's a good weekend to get your Christmas shopping started. And great cookies, you're right.
Thank you kindly. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a couple of thank yous go out to regional staff. As everybody knows, on October the 31st on Halloween, we had a major storm down in the south end. Wainfleet, Fort Erie, and ourselves were hit quite hard. Port Colborne sustained the largest or the highest winds at 133 kilometers an hour. We put our team together about 9 o'clock, 9:30 that night, our emergency team at our fire hall, and from there we contacted the region's emergency system. They called us back very quickly to see what we needed. We also called the province at the time to give them notice that we may have to declare an emergency. We didn't have to do that. As the time went on, the winds started to subside and the lake started to recede back to levels that we weren't in danger anymore. However, all three communities did sustain quite a bit of damage. Ours was mostly trees and power lines, but our marina sustained quite a bit of damage, which we're assessing now. But the region got on board very quickly with us and gave us all the help that we could muster that evening going into Friday and Saturday. They helped us with the Red Cross open up a resort, a center at Port Cares in Port Colborne where people could drop in. And the biggest thing with power outages is their telephones, cell phones. So they came in, they could have a hot coffee, a bowl of chili, a bowl of soup. There was Red Cross people there if they needed anything like that. Everybody that came in came to get a little bit warm and plug in their phones. So we had all kinds of outlets available for that. So we thank the region for that. Also, the regional police, which Mayor Gibson and Councillor Gale and I sit on that, and we were able to call our detachment in Port Colborne, and at our very first meeting at around 9:30, quarter to 10, we had our acting staff sergeant come out, and we were able to establish, based on the calls that they had that evening,
which ended up being all for the storm. They weren't called out to car accidents or any type of crime like that went on that evening. They were able to establish themselves at our points with Canadian Niagara Power, their contractors, our staff, and the contractors that we called in to make sure that our roads were safe, that they were closed off properly, that people weren't trying to go around the barricades. Although we did catch a couple of people that did. But with the way our service went together, because we did have an emergency team full-day meeting about 3 months ago, and coming up shortly is supposed to be our mock emergency. Well, I'll tell you, it came into play pretty quick. It worked out very well. So again, Chair, through you to all our staff, thank you very much. It worked out very well. We will be having our wrap up in the next week or two once we get all our information together at our end, and we'll be calling on your staff to attend that, as well as Niagara Regional Police and all the other parties that were involved. But you know, it is pretty harrowing when you know, the power's going out. Yeah. Luckily, the temperatures weren't to an effect that we had to evacuate people from buildings. We actually went to two of our major seniors' apartment buildings. Our fire services went through that to make sure everybody was okay. Most people had already made arrangements to go to friends or relatives that had power, or they were fine where they were to sit it out. We gave them numbers to call if they needed us at all or needed help to get out of the building if the elevators went out. But that didn't happen, so we are grateful. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you for that report, Councillor Greenwood.
On another festive note, if you'd like to come out and see how a really great Santa Claus parade is put together, come on down to Niagara Falls. I beat you. It's on the 16th. It's from 11 till 2, however long you'd like to be. And then you can go off to the bazaar up in Thorold. Anyway, the 16th on Saturday, Victoria Avenue, right through to the City Hall.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that yourself and the good Mayor Welland were up in Welland last Saturday celebrating Canada Hockey Canada, or whatever that program is that they have.
Hometown hockey, Rogers hometown hockey.
And I understand that there was an animal introduced there for the Canada Games, and you didn't mention it, and neither of you, Frank.
Well, we were
so
leaving
can
that
you
to
give
you.
us your impression of our Canada Games mascot, because I have no idea what it looks like. A turtle, good. That makes sense.
It is a turtle, we've heard. A couple of things I'll mention too, since it's announcements that you may or may not be aware of. Tomorrow, the Niagara Métis flag raising takes place at 10:30 at 3250 Schmoen Parkway. The Niagara on the Lake Museum exhibit opening is tomorrow from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Family and Children's Services Gala in Niagara Falls at the Americana tomorrow night. And let's see what else we can say is on the weekend. Indigenous Remembrance Ceremony, 10:45 a.m. Saturday at Queenston Heights. And I better leave it at that. I guess the Hotel du tree lighting takes place at 4 o'clock, probably at the Alaska Mayor, probably at the Market Square, I would think. Anyway, anybody else have any advertisements, any reports to us?
So big.
Councillor Encina, I knew I could count on you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, Santa Claus is coming to Fort Erie on Saturday at 4 o'clock. So those of us that are on the naughty list have a chance to get back onto the good list. So if anybody's interested, 4 o'clock Saturday.
Thank you. The next item on here is closed session. So I have to figure out what I'm supposed to do with this. Is there a need to go into closed session? There is. So if the committee minutes are adopted, entirely okay. If there's a need to go into closed session for the confidential report submitted directly to council, then ask for a mover and seconder to go into closed session. That's my orders. Councillor Houston has moved it. And who haven't I got yet so far? Well, let's say Councillor Height, seconding it. All in favor? Thank you. It's carried. I saw enough hands to carry it. We're clearing the house now. Rigby, and I have a seconder, Councillor Witteveen. At the report PWC 11-2019 being the closed session minutes of the Public Works Committee meeting held on Tuesday, November 5, 2019 be approved. Any discussion on that? Councillor DeZero?
No.
I could call the question now, okay. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. I guess the next are bylaws, it looks like. No, not yet. Another motion coming up yet. On the screen, we have a mover and seconder for what you see on the screen. Councillor Height is the mover. Councillor Yip is the seconder. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Keep an eye on your screens. You now have a motion on the screen that staff be directed to provide a report respecting the weekly pickup of medical waste and diaper collection, including both implementation initiatives and costs involved. That's moved by Councillor DeZero. That's seconded by Councillor Butters. And
Okay.
Councillor DeZero, you wish to speak?
Yes, please. So I'm just, staff through you, Mr. Chair. Do I need to add that report would go to Budget Committee? And I'd like to do that then.
Clerk? Automatically goes there. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. There's one more coming up. Is now on your screen. That report, CSD 69-2019, dated October 9, 2019, respecting a matter of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, Niagara Gateway Economic Zone and Center Community Improvement Plan, CIP, RE 200, 242, 246, and 250, Buckner Road, Welland, be received for information. Mover and seconder. The mover is going to be Councillor Gibson. Seconder, Councillor Greenwood. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we go to bylaws. So, Councillor Diodati.
Yeah, thank you. Chair, I would make the motion that the region engage a fairness advisor for the waste management RFP. Given that it's probably the largest contract in the region's history, and given the fact that we have engaged them for much smaller contracts, I'll make the motion that we engage them to review and be a part of this process.
Point of order?
Yes, point of order.
That would be a notice of motion unless it's waived by the council. So that's a procedural. You'd have to ask for a waiving of the rules and then moving it from a notice of motion to a motion.
Well, how did we do the last one about the diaper pickup?
That was an amendment.
We'll go to the clerk for our ruling on this, along with legal. Clerk, both looking at the Councillor Sanzik has said this should be a notice of motion. Councillor Diodati believes it can be a motion.
Asking for consistency. We did I did the same way under the advisement of our clerk that we would do both of them in open session. So I'm just wondering what the difference is.
Counselor, first of all, the clerk and then Counselor Edgar.
I was,
Counselor Edgar first, go ahead.
I was just gonna suggest that, that was a direction to staff. This is an entirely separate motion altogether. This was just a direction to staff.
Clerk?
Through you, Chair, I would agree with Councillor Edgar that the other motion was a direction to staff regarding those items. In this case, certainly it somewhat relates to the topic, but it is separate, so putting it forward as a notice of motion and waiving the rules would be procedurally correct.
Counselor Diodati.
Well, then I'll just make it a notice of motion and we'll deal with it next time.
Thank you, Counselor. It is noted. We have a notice of motion. We now go to bylaws. I call on Counselor Ugolini for the motion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Jordan, that bills 2019-82 to 2019-85 be now read and do pass. Councillor Height, it's Councillor Jordan.
Counselor Height is seconding that?
Yep.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.